Toxic relationships, toxic friendships are the worst because it feels like even if you want to cut this person off, even if you realize that they're bad for you and the relationship isn't healthy, at a certain point you have so much personal history with this person. You have so much of a relationship you built over the years, shared experiences and memories, that it doesn't feel so easy as just saying, we're done, goodbye. It's like at times in my life, I have been in a place where my only friends were toxic people, but it was like I couldn't cut them off. I couldn't just let go of that relationship because then it was like I was completely alone. And some part of me felt like even if this person is toxic, I would rather have a friend that's toxic than have no friends at all, And I think what's strange about this is obviously if you knew that this person was toxic before you even got into this relationship with them, before you even became friends with them, you might have gone about things differently. You might not have decided to have this person in your life. Like if it turns out to be a regret, then you wouldn't have agreed to it in the first place. But it seems like toxic people hide and pretend that they're perfectly normal and functioning. They don't want to advertise to the world that they're broken like that, And I think that's the right way to look at it, is that these people aren't usually like evil. It's not out of malevolence that they do what they do. It's just out of selfishness. And I think toxic itself, that word I've been using, is kind of a stupid word. It's just the only word that comes to mind right now. But I guess more what I mean is like there are certain people where you're having a conversation with them and you realize they're not actually listening to what you have to say. They're just waiting for their own turn to speak, And maybe this person might confess things to you like, oh, I would steal from anybody if it benefited me. I just won't steal from you because you're my friend, Like when you see that someone acts a certain way with other people and this is who they are, but then they're like selective and just specific individuals they become friends with, they don't act that way towards. It's like you can judge a person's character by how they treat strangers, by how they treat just everyone in a general way. Even if this person treats you incredibly well, you might see that they actually don't treat everyone else this way, and at times they don't treat you very well either. Like once it becomes too difficult for them, once they've lost patience and aren't able to maintain that facade anymore, it kind of comes down. You realize this person doesn't actually care about me. They don't actually want to salvage this friendship or make it better or invest in any way. It's just convenient in some way, or they benefit from having you in their lives. I think it's sort of this like codependency that sometimes develops where it's not a true relationship, but it's better than the alternative, which is having no friends at all. So a lot of the times we kind of get stuck in this trap where we feel like we don't want to be alone, and the only people in our lives seem to be very self-absorbed and toxic, but it's better than the alternative of being alone. I went through this for years where I had some real genuine friends, but they moved away, and the friends that were left, I wasn't that close with initially, but I ended up hanging out with them much more because my alternatives were gone, and I started to realize, this person is only capable of something superficial, and I can't really trust them. Like at times it seemed like they'd kind of stabbed me in the back, and then they would make excuses and use their logic to explain why they didn't stab me in the back and why they were perfectly justified in what they did. But I can kind of see through all that, and I forgive them anyway because I believe in second chances, and maybe I'm foolish for that, but some of these people I've kept around for far longer than I should have. It's like it's almost this sunk cost where when you think about cutting this person off, when you think about ending this relationship, even in a friendly, amicable way, you might sort of think about all of these memories with this person, all of this time you've spent together, all of these things you've done, and it becomes a lot harder. You're like, wow, I've invested so much into this person, like, what would be the point of it all if I just stopped talking to them now, And maybe they have their good sides. Maybe they're actually very kind to you, or maybe they're very generous with their money, or maybe, there's always some thing they use to kind of keep you on the hook, some like advantage they can hold over you in a way in your friendship, and it makes it like a little bit harder for you. You might feel like you're just being a bad guy and not understanding their weaknesses and being like too critical. Maybe you'll start to think, wow, they have these positive sides. Like maybe I'm just actually just being too hard on them. Maybe they're not toxic, and maybe those times that they like lose their patience and blow up at me over nothing is not necessarily because, you know, they're trying to do that, but just because they're not able to control themselves. And that's why I don't like the word toxic, because really generally what I'm talking about is just like relationships where there's not a firm boundary and you feel like this person is crossing it, and it's negative for you to be a part of it anymore, and it's infringing upon, you know, your peace and tranquility in a way. It's like some people, you don't have to hate them, you don't have to, you know, wish them wrong, but you might not want them in your life. You might think that you'd be better off if you never talked to this person. Maybe there's something about them that never seems to change, and it's this negative attribute that you don't necessarily want to be burdened by and have them come around with that in your life. And I think it takes a lot of personal respect to be able to cut off these sorts of people, to be able to have boundaries and say, hey, like, you know, this is infringing upon my peace and tranquility. Like my life, my happiness is not as fulfilling because of you, because of our relationship, because it's drawing away so much of my energy. And that's not selfish. You know, you don't have to be a martyr and stay friends with people who treat you badly, or who, you know, victimize themselves to make you look like a bad guy, or who guilt you in your relationship. Like this is even worse when it comes to actual relationships, like not just a friendship, but like a girlfriend or a boyfriend. At that point, you know, there's a lot more at stake, and so people like this turn much more into the manipulative side of things to keep this relationship going. If they really, you know, it's like that's what you call a parasite. You know, I think a lot of people are familiar with this, where certain people, they get into a relationship and they become so emotionally attached to the idea of this relationship, and maybe they develop this sort of codependency, and they're sort of a selfish person, but they need to act well enough to, you know, keep up this relationship because they're reliant on it for different reasons at a certain point. And a lot of this is out of like narcissism, but some of it's just out of like inexperience. Some of these people, maybe they just, you know, will go through that a little while in their first couple of relationships. Maybe they'll grow up and change. You can only hope. Like, cutting these people off is not saying I have no hope for your future. It's saying, you know, staying in this relationship is hurting me right now, and I can only think so much about you and your future and how you might develop and stop being as destructive towards me. Like, really what you need to be focusing on is how you feel right now in this moment, because life is war. Life is a battle to maintain your own peace and happiness. Most people don't see it that way, and so they're caught in the riptides of stress and unforeseen events and money and all of these things that just ruin them and make them enjoy life a lot less than they should. It's like, really, you need to see life like a war, like a battlefield, where the objective is to just be happy and maintain your peace, and whatever means necessary. You know, I'm, aside from obviously like morally reprehensible things, you know, maybe if you have the inclination to do morally reprehensible things, you should check yourself into a psych ward. I don't know. That's a deeper, more systemic issue we're talking about here. But like, genuinely, I'm making this video because I know there's some people who are kind of on the hook, you know what I mean? They're kind of being strung along by someone who has all of the power in this relationship because they use these tactics of manipulation, because genuinely underneath it all, they're a very selfish person who use others like resources. And maybe you're not even fully aware that this is what they're doing, but the human mind is very capable of manipulation. It's very capable of, you know, changing people's perceptions through logic and through acts and through manipulation of some kind. And there's lots of people who do this. There's lots of people who, you know, all of their relationships are based on some amount of guilt or shame or control. And, you know, I feel for those people. I feel for them because they'll never know what it's like to really see eye to eye with someone. Maybe they're too selfish, too stuck in these like lower energies of, you know, person, like your own self, your own person. They can't like see beyond that. They can't see from another person's perspective. They can't have empathy or sympathy. And they aren't necessarily like a psychopath. I think a lot of people, much more than we might think, are actually like this, and it's perfectly normal. But I think if they're not actively trying to work on it, then they're just going to be tearing everyone else down, and you do not want to let yourself be the one torn down. It's like there's this common example with drowning people where they say don't just go swim up to a drowning person and try to like pull them out of the water, you know, because they'll start to like climb on top of you. They'll start to like drag you down, try to get on top of you so they can breathe. That's like a real thing, and it's not that they're trying to drown you, it's that they don't want to drown. And it's not even like a logical thing they're doing, it's the human body just reacts that way. So they say if you want to help someone who's drowning, you actually need the right plan. You need to come out there with a life vest or a buoy or something to like prop them up on so they're not going to drag you down. It's like you can't help anyone unless you've helped yourself first. Like maybe you think it's the right thing to do to stay friends with this person. Maybe you think you can help them. I've felt that way about some people for years until I realized I can't help this person, and it is not helping me to be in this friendship anymore. So I'm not going to make it a big deal and tell them like I hate your guts. I'm just gonna like ghost them. I'm just gonna say like, hey, like, you know, I need to focus on other things in my life, and this friendship, this relationship is not beneficial for me. Like I'm not, benefiting like emotionally from it at all. So I think I'd like some space. And in my opinion, I would rather me myself be completely alone than have friends that are dragging me down. I'd rather focus on myself and cultivate my own self relationship than invest in people that will never invest back. And so with that, I'll leave you guys off.